There are moments when you feel the need to explain yourself, not because you are confused, but because you are tired of being misunderstood. Maybe it happens late at night, when the house is quiet and your thoughts are loud, and you replay conversations you never finished, words you swallowed to keep the peace, truths you carried alone because explaining felt heavier than silence. I want to sit with you there for a moment, not to rush you out of that feeling, but to honor it. Because learning to let go without explaining yourself is not coldness, it is not pride, and it is not a lack of love. Sometimes it is wisdom growing quietly inside you. There is a season when you realize that not everyone who asks for an explanation is truly seeking understanding. Some people are listening only to defend their position, to justify their comfort, or to keep you where they are familiar with you. And there comes a point in faith when God begins to teach you that you do not owe your deepest obedience to human approval. Even Jesus, who spoke with clarity and compassion, did not explain himself to everyone. There were moments when he answered with silence, not because he lacked truth, but because truth does not need to wrestle with resistance. You see this pattern throughout Scripture, where God speaks and then waits, not because he is uncertain, but because growth requires space. And sometimes, the space God gives feels like unanswered questions to other people. If you are learning to let go without explaining yourself, it may be because God is teaching you how to rest in what he already knows about you. There is a deep freedom that comes when you stop trying to be understood by everyone and start trusting that God understands you fully. The Psalms speak often of God knowing the heart of him, discerning thoughts before they are spoken. That means the parts of you that feel tangled, unfinished, or even contradictory are not hidden from him. So why exhaust yourself trying to translate your soul to people who are not listening with care? Letting go without explaining does not mean you stop being kind. It means you stop bleeding in places that cannot heal you. There is a difference between openness and self-betrayal. And faith matures when you learn to tell the difference. Some women are taught, subtly and repeatedly, that they must always soften their boundaries with explanations, that silence is rude, that clarity is owed, that peace must be negotiated. But the wisdom of God often works differently. Proverbs reminds us that even a wise person can appear silent, and in that silence, understanding can grow. Not every moment requires defense. Not every decision needs a witness stand. Not every goodbye needs a closing argument. Sometimes letting go quietly is the most honest thing you can do. There is grief in that, and God sees it. Because when you stop explaining, you often feel misunderstood, and misunderstanding can ache like loneliness. But there is a holy companionship that begins to form in that ache. It is the quiet presence of God, who does not demand clarity from you before he stays. He walks with you even when your reasons are still forming, even when your heart is still sorting what it needs, even when your faith feels like a whisper instead of a declaration. The woman learning to let go is not weak. She is learning discernment. She is learning when words invite healing and when words only invite argument. She is learning that peace does not always come from being understood, but from being aligned with God. Jesus once said that his peace is not the same peace the world offers. Worldly peace often comes from agreement, from approval, from everyone nodding along. God's peace comes from obedience, even when it costs comfort. And obedience sometimes looks like silence. Not bitter silence, not passive silence, but grounded, prayerful silence that trusts God to speak where you no longer need to. There is a moment in spiritual growth when you stop trying to correct every misunderstanding and start asking God which misunderstandings are not yours to fix. That moment feels unsettling at first, because explaining yourself can feel like control, like safety, like making sure the story does not get twisted. But God is not fragile. Your calling is not fragile. Your character is not fragile. The book of Romans reminds us that God works in ways beyond our full understanding, and that includes how he defends his children. Sometimes he allows people to misunderstand you for a season, not as punishment, but as protection. Protection from overexposure. Protection from being shaped by voices that do not carry wisdom. Protection from shrinking your obedience to fit someone else's comfort. If you are in that season now, I want you to know that you are not abandoning love. You are practicing stewardship of your heart. Jesus often withdrew to quiet places. He stepped away from crowds, from demands, from expectations. Not because he lacked compassion, but because intimacy with God required space. And you are allowed to do the same. You are allowed to step back without explaining every step. You are allowed to choose peace without defending it. You are allowed to outgrow conversations that no longer nurture your faith. This does not make you unkind. It makes you attentive to what God is doing in you. There is a verse in Ecclesiastes that speaks of seasons, of times to speak and times to be silent. Silence is not absence. It is often preparation. It is where clarity settles. It is where God reorders priorities without distraction. And when you stop explaining yourself to everyone, you begin to hear God more clearly. Because you are no longer drowning his voice in the noise of justification. I know it can feel risky. You may worry that people will assume the worst, that relationships will shift, that distance will grow. And sometimes they will. But faith is not about preserving every connection. It is about preserving your obedience. Jesus said plainly that following him would not always bring understanding, even from those closest to us. That truth is not meant to scare you, but to steady you, because your worth is not measured by how well you are explained. Your worth is rooted in being created, known, and loved by God. There is a deep confidence that grows when you stop narrating your life and start living it with intention. Confidence that does not shout. Confidence that does not prove. Confidence that rests. This kind of confidence does not come from self-assurance alone, but from surrender. From trusting that God is present even when the room does not understand you. From believing that silence can be faithful. If you are grieving the loss of being understood, bring that grief to God. The Psalms are full of honest prayers from people who felt unseen, misjudged, and weary. God does not rush those prayers. He does not minimize them. He receives them as sacred. And in that receiving, he begins to heal the parts of you that felt responsible for everyone else's comfort. Letting go without explaining is often the moment you stop carrying what was never yours to carry. It is the moment you hand God the burden of being the interpreter of your life. And he is far more patient, far more faithful, and far more capable than you ever had to be. There is gentleness in this path. Not dramatic transformation, not loud declarations, but quiet alignment. You begin to notice that you sleep a little easier, that your prayers feel less strained, that your spirit feels less scattered, because you are no longer splitting yourself into versions meant for different audiences. You are becoming whole. Wholeness does not require explanation. It requires honesty before God, and God already has that. If you feel led to stay connected to messages like this, you are welcome to subscribe to Dear Woman of Faith channel, where reflections like these are shared with care and intention. But whether you subscribe or not, know this: you are allowed to move at the pace of grace. You are allowed to change quietly. You are allowed to trust God more than you trust being understood. And as you continue this journey, may you feel gratitude for the strength God is forming in you, for the discernment He is sharpening, and for the peace that grows when you no longer feel the need to explain who you are becoming. May you rest tonight, knowing that God sees you fully, walks with you gently, and holds your story with more care than any explanation ever could. And as this moment comes to a close, I want you to breathe gently into the truth that you are not behind, you are not failing, and you are not losing anything that God intended for you to keep. Some things fall away, not because you were careless, but because they could not follow you into the deeper peace God is shaping within you. Letting go without explaining is not the end of your voice. It is the beginning of wisdom, choosing when to speak and when to rest. God is not confused by your silence. He is not disappointed by your boundaries. He is not distant because you chose peace over proving. Scripture reminds us that God gives rest to the weary, not after they explain themselves well enough, but when they finally come to Him honestly. So come as you are. Unfinished thoughts, quiet strength, unspoken goodbyes. Trust that God understands the language of your heart, even when others never learn it. And if tonight your only prayer is a sigh or a whisper that says, "Lord, you know," that is enough, because He does. May you carry gratitude for how far you have come, hope for what is still unfolding, and a steady trust that God's timing does not need your explanation to be perfect. Rest now. You are held,